It's important for us as we begin to be reminded that this time is meant to be a safe and brave space for church leaders to bring the truth of who they are and how they are doing. These conversations are an intentional step to live more fully into God's dream for us as the body of Christ. We have an important and timely topic today, and here to help us center our hearts and our minds on Christ is our colleague, the Reverend William Flippen Jr. Bill currently serves as the assistant to the bishop and director of evangelical mission of the Southeastern Pennsylvania Synod. Bill has served in many roles: preacher, pastor, teacher, writer, leader of faith in many different realms, literally all over the world. But I believe the role that is nearest and dearest to his heart is that of spouse and father. One glance at his Facebook page tells the story of joy and pride that the love his family brings to his life and the dedication he brings to these relationships. Bill, welcome to the room, and thank you for bringing our time of devotion today.
I am honored and humbled for this opportunity to see so many familiar faces in this group. One in particular is Pastor Lawrence Clark. He has been a mentor, a friend, a brother through my initial journey when I started Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago some 17 years ago, to this very day almost. So just grateful for the journey and for this opportunity to be with so many stakeholders in our great denomination. Thank you, Jill. You are indeed a friend, a great witness for our church and for this lucrative work of coaching. Let me tell you a bit about my journey through COVID-19. I moved to Philadelphia last year around this time without my almost 2-year-old daughter and wife. The hardest part of the move was leaving my daughter. And then never would have imagined 8 months later returning, which I thought maybe at best 2 months. I remember the CDC was saying, 2 months of no in-person meetings. So I said, hey, I'll be back in Philadelphia in May. But amid this pandemic, I have spent more time with my daughter, who will be 3 next month. And what's interesting about it, she is, her language of love is definitely quality time. I mean, less than an hour ago, she said, hey, Daddy, play with me. And I did. And I've learned so much about parenting. One thing that I've noticed is her logic is awakening. She loves to explore by observation. She is in tune with her feelings, emotions, and emotional intelligence, which I want. She asks me constantly questions and says, no. Isn't it interesting that what separates us from other creatures is the ability to use logic? But society, through socialization, peer pressure to color, and the acceptable lines, takes away from our originality. That's why I am amazed of hearing call stories of how persons come to their true realities, and it always goes back to what they thought they should be or what was accepted, and they conform to that. A couple of weeks ago, I began looking at her baby book and reflected, as I always do, with pride and joy on the greatest day of my life. Don't tell her mother that. And the honor to be called Daddy. Our parental role, as Jill said, is one of the greatest blessings we can ever have. A model parent biblically that speaks to me more than any other parent is Jochebed. Who's Jochebed? Does anybody who know Jochebed? I'm sure you do. Jochebed is the mother of Moses that had an indelible imprint in shaping the Exodus leader liberated by God's help of Israel. Moses. So from this, I just want to share a couple of things of Moses as I can imagine him and Jochebed looking over his baby book, whether it was in the palace, Pharaoh's palace, and how we look at our spiritual baby books of memories and reflections in the midst of this change. We all know that baby stuff is totally different than it was when I was born 44 years ago. I literally have a baby book, but these days you take photos from your latest smartphone. You might even have a virtual digital diary. In fact, it seems as if that the gender reveal is more important than the chronicling of a baby book. I love to see the pictures of baby's first squinty-eyed days of life, the cast made of the baby's footprints, where you mix a pre-made, non-toxic and non-stick dough, stick baby's foot in, and then let it dry for 24 to 26 hours. Those are great to gather. And through times, those ways that we look at it has changed. If the child is adopted, it may be a story about the day he or she became a long-awaited member of the family. It could be a funny story or even an anxious one as parents recall their joy and fear over this new life that has suddenly come. In any case, these stories become verbal footprints of the subject. If that's the case, let's imagine the stories that Moses' mom told him when he was old enough to hear them and find the details surrounding his birth. Well, we know that the circumstances of his birth were, in a very real sense, a foreshadowing of what was to come. It's in this story that we learn this child who would grow up to defy a world power and lead a ragtag group of slaves to freedom comes by his rebellious streak honestly. The first footprint that I believe that we will see with Moses is online. Baby book might have been a news article from the Cairo Chronicle about Pharaoh's order to the midwives to kill off all the male children born to the Hebrew slaves. This Pharaoh seems insistently paranoid, so much so that he's willing to guarantee the end of his cheap labor force in order to preserve his hold on power. Can we say there is nothing new under the sun? Two of the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, realized that Pharaoh is a few bricks shy of a pyramid and defy the order, blaming their failure to do the nasty work on the vigorous constitution of the Hebrew women who gave birth before the midwives can get there. So I believe that Jochebed told Moses God used unlikely people to do God's will. Isn't that good news? That God uses not the best and the brightest, those who have gone to Harvard, those who have gone to Yale, but God uses those who are unlikely. God uses many people in biblical illustrations. God uses those who are the least and the likely, the lost and the left out. The second footprints, you might see a few hieroglyphics of Mom Jochebed, Dad Amron, and Sister Miriam with the baby, etchings that look like they've been hammered out at night or when no one else was around. For 3 months, they kept the baby under wraps, maybe snapping a couple of early morning pictures at the Spink, or those obligatory naked baby pictures of the little guy bathing in the Nile. Those memories that are dear, those memories that are unique to this child. In fact, Exodus chapter 2 says that when Jochebed saw Moses, she noticed that it was something different about Moses, that he was a godly child. In fact, I just thought about this. My friend, Pastor Larry Clark, in his biography says that when he was young, that people said that he was a marked child, and we all are marked by God's baptism. So second thought, God gave Moses a family who believed in him. It's important for families and communities to believe in us, to help us to know our baptism. Third footprint, the next memory log, you might see a piece of papyrus, a reminder of the basket that Moses was put in and set adrift down the Nile. Interestingly, the same Hebrew word for this basket is used for ark in the story of Noah in Genesis 2:3-6:14. This tells us, as many other stories, that Moses was saved because God had people who were creative and were risk takers. During this time of COVID-19, we are in need of creative risk takers. You know, in fact, I've seen this in the church, that now people are, at first, it seems forced to be more techno-savvy. But I believe that we are called to be the headlights, not the taillights of change, that we should be so into the thing that Bill Gates calls us. One of the things that's so interesting to me is that I went to Indonesia one time, and I had my iPhone. It wasn't an iPhone 10, which I think is a decent phone. It was like an iPhone 6. And when I took it out, they laughed at it because they were already an iPhone 10, 11. We live in a flip phone. We live in an iPhone 15 world with a flip phone mentality. But thanks be to God that because of this and because of parenting, we have coming with new creative ways of doing new things. Thank God for you parents. Thank God for you practitioners who are setting forth those creative ways in the midst of that first tiny casting of life and being courageous. So the questions I want to ask you: how can we help the parents in our congregations move their children's footsteps in the right direction? Are you prepared for today? I would encourage you to ponder. One hymn that I love, that's from our ELW number 732, was "I was there to hear your born cry." Fits the theme of God as the constant peripheral presence. Where are your footprints taking you? Where is God calling you to serve, to learn, to help build the kingdom of God? Listen for that still small voice of God and make those footprints count. God's hand of providence preserved Moses. God's hand of providence is preserving our children, just as it's preserving my daughter for the mission that God has for him or her today. And believe you me, God will do no less for us parents. Amen. Amen.
Hi, friends. Bill, thank you for that impassioned time of centering and really setting the stage for us to invite our guest speakers into the room. I ask your patience with me as I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty right now, hoping that you all are able to hear me. And yeah, so we are very pleased to welcome to the room today the Reverend Dr. Kendra Mohn and the Reverend Jessica Harris Daum. Kendra is an accomplished theologian who has served in multiple capacities across the country, including currently being the lead pastor of Trinity Lutheran Church in Fort Worth, Texas. She enjoys teaching, music, being a scholar, photography, and travel. Along with these roles, she is also the spouse of Bishop Erik Gronberg and mom to 3 adorable children and a rescue cat. I will also add that one of the best things that I learned about Kendra is that she was also raised on an Iowa farm and she loves the Iowa State Cyclones. Jess is the Director of Evangelical Mission for the Eastern North Dakota Synod. She has served as pastor, mission developer, and ELCA coach. Jess is an inspired visionary who consistently taps the creative nudgings of the Spirit as she designs her work and leans heavily into the tools of discipleship as she engages her life with her husband and children. One of the things I appreciate most about Jess is that she takes the faith formation of the next generation very seriously, and she recognizes that this does not happen in a vacuum, that community, all of us, play a large role in this process. Folks, we're really in for a treat today. We will hear the stories of these incredible women of faith and also be challenged to discover how we can support parents like them, especially in this time of pandemic. Kendra, let's start with you. Thanks for being with us today.
You're welcome, and thank you for the invitation to be here. When I first received the invitation to talk to you all today about parenting in time of pandemic, I said, I hope they don't want any advice. This is this is not going to be like someone speaking from a place of having things figured out, but rather someone who's just speaking from an experience from the last several months. And so as I look around the screen, I see some familiar faces of people that I've known for many years, some I've only known for a few years, and some that I've never seen before. And it's wonderful to make your acquaintance. I recognize that some of you probably have parented or are continuing to parent. Some of you have decided that's not your vocation, and some of you for whom that's a distant memory, right? And so to have this kind of diverse conglomerate of people who are going to have this conversation about parenting, it's just important for me to say at the outset that I don't speak for anyone except myself. You know, this is just simply my experience of what's been happening, the things that we've been able to process and learn, and valuing what I think this group is all about, which is just sharing perspective, sharing experiences of what we've been able to have. So the first thing I want to do is just briefly share my screen so you can see who I'm talking about. This is my family. This is our backyard. I'm the one in blue. My husband, Erik Gronberg, is the one in the white shirt. Our oldest daughter, Annika, is on the right. She is recently 12. Our middle daughter, Greta, is on the left. She is recently 8. And then our little boy, yes, it's a boy. He's got long hair, gender stuff, right? His name is Axel, and he is 4.5. So this is my family, and these are our quarantine family photos that we had taken by a congregation member who lives not very far from us. She's just starting out in photography business, and so we asked her to come over and take our photo. This looks lovely. I'm hanging this in my dining room. But the truth of this photo is not what it looks like, right? It never is. The bishop hadn't had a haircut in 6 weeks. In fact, I tried. And in the back, there was a little hole in the back of his head and his hair where I had taken the clippers too far. It's since grown and we fixed it. And every haircut, I get like a little bit better, just a tiny bit better. But he swears he doesn't care, right? The kids had fought pretty much all day. There's 3 of them. So at any given time, there's only one that can be happy. That's the rule. The little one in the middle, when I posted this photo, someone who's known me my whole life, who was my babysitter, messaged me and said, "Is Axel okay? He looks sad in that photo, but I just worry about him." And you know, she's right, that there's a lot to worry about when it comes to little guys during this time. And you know, we had intended to like shower all day, but you can see my girls' hair is still wet because it didn't happen until like 4 o'clock. And then these photos were going to happen at 5 o'clock. And before that, we had a Zoom call. And after this, we had a Zoom call. And everyone was mad. Everyone was crabby. And so we took this photo. And you never want a photo like this to, you know, determine reality, right? But both things are true. Like, we had this day and we have this photo. And that to me sort of symbolizes in some ways what we've been working through since mid-March. So in my role at Trinity Lutheran Church, I'm lead pastor. So I serve as head of staff. We have a school, Trinity Lutheran Children's Center, where in a normal time we'd have 120 kids every day on site. And then of course I support my husband as a vocation in his role as bishop. And then we have our 3 children. So that's sort of the 3 arenas of my life. There's this church and school thing, and then there's, you know, being a good collaborative spouse in the Synod ministry, and then there's the parenting piece. And the spring era for us was, I really haven't found the right word to describe how overwhelming the whole thing was. You know, we were trying to run the Synod office, the congregation, Westcliff Elementary, Young Women's Leadership Academy, and 4-year-old preschool auto margin. And it just didn't go very well. You know, at any given moment, one of those things was fine and everything else was not fine. And then every 3 hours, somebody needs to eat. And even if they all could like the same thing, it still takes time to make the food. But of course, they don't all like the same thing, or they're not going to like it today. So all of that just feeds into, what we were experiencing in the spring. Over the summer, things have stabilized a bit because there hasn't been the demands of online school at the same time as everything else. But the parenting things continue. So a couple things I want to outline about that. The first is that our church and the Trinity Lutheran Children's Center that we are a part of is an important ministry in our congregation. And we did close for a number of weeks during the shelter in place in Fort Worth. And then we had to decide what we were going to do, because we had gotten a PPP loan, but we have, 35, 40 staff members. And for a lot of our teachers, that's their primary income. And so most of those people who teach at our school, who have taught for many, many years, are women of color. And we had a lot of conversations about our school opening as a justice issue. What is it that we're supposed to do to support families of all kinds in our, not just the people who send their kids to our school or our church members, but of course all of our beloved teachers. So since June, we have been open and slowly building back. It is very much a rebuilding process. We've managed to keep teachers paid and employed, which is something that we're really proud of. But every day is nervous because we have implemented many protocols for COVID-19. And every day you wonder if one of the people is going to come in contact with somebody with COVID, and then we need to shut down, and then the whole process will start again of the cleaning and having the people come in and sign off on everything. So that piece of the puzzle for us has many facets, and I think it illustrates the conflicting and oftentimes competing demands and questions that parents face. Do we send a child to our child care center that's open, that's at our church, and that will support other families, right? That will allow us to work. And if we do that, then what else are we not going to do? Do we send our kids, if there's an option for in-person school, do we send our kids to in-person school? Do we keep them home? If we do, how do we do that? If we have the kind of resources to hire help for that, ought we do that? Or ought we find a way to find other people resources so that they can, help their kids? What I've come to see in parenting and trying to do ministry in these days is there's just a never-ending set of decisions to make, and there is no clear criteria for making those decisions. So that's been my experience. Personally, at church, we had very strong, robust social media presence, but nothing live worship, nothing online on the weekends. So we had to make that entire switch during COVID-19. So we went from nothing to a live stream, and it took, we moved mountains, to make it happen. And I remember one conversation with a parishioner who was in a very different life stage than I am, an older woman, and she was talking to me about our current online offerings and talking about how unsatisfying the experience was of worshiping in that way. And I normally, of course, can rely on my training and my boundaries in order to coach her through that experience and honor her where she is and keep my own feelings at bay. But it was hard because of how much work we had put into putting everything online. And what was interesting was we finished the conversation. I was honest with her that I was disappointed that she was that unsatisfied. But I understood. And 4 hours later, she called me back and she said, I talked to my daughter about our conversation, and she told me I had to call you back and apologize because I have no idea what you are going through these days with having your kids at home. So I thought it was really interesting. I've known her for 10 years. We have a really good relationship. But having that conversation also illustrated to me how those who are in the middle of the parenting thing understand what's going on, and those who are outside maybe really have no idea. That it seems like for those of us who are parenting right now, it's an all-encompassing experience, and yet for those who are not in that stage of life, they really don't understand, that they don't have an idea of what it's like to have that experience at home. So that sort of bifurcation of not shared experience, right, being of the same storm but not in the same boat, that's also been something that I have experienced. Also, as I'm sure in many facets, however you slice this, there has been a certain fraying of relationships. of people that you thought you shared some parenting understandings with of how you did things, people that you thought you kind of were on the same page with. Or, you know, people who aren't parents, but whom you had some sort of, relationship with, or if you sliced it this way, you're sort of the same mind. And now we're slicing everything a different way. And when you slice it this way, now all of a sudden there's all these decisions to make that you find that you completely disagree with people on. And so relationships have really splintered, and people that you thought you could count on to help with a lot of the parenting things that you're doing, now you're finding you don't know if you trust them or not, and they don't know if they trust you. And so the loss of that network is very disorienting, I think, for a lot of parents. It's been true in my case. Because parenting, when you're working full time and so's your spouse and you're trying to do all this stuff, it is a village endeavor, it really is. And so when you can no longer rely on certain of those relationships to make things happen, that's an unsettling feeling, and it leaves you feeling more isolated than you were before. Then there's the actual, dealing with the kids and the parenting of the children. And every one of my children is very, very different and has responded to COVID-19 in their own unique ways. Axel, for a long time, he's 4. He had a very hard time being physically separated from any of us, that he had to be physically attached to one of us. And I don't care how endearing people find it to have a kid on Zoom calls, it compromises your authority to sit there with a kid on a Zoom call. And it is distracting. I've preached holding a baby, I've done this before, right? But it's a different thing when you're trying to run a meeting and you have a kid on your lap and everyone thinks, even if they think it's cute, it's not the same, You don't hold your office the same way when you do that. There was at one point where we actually had to tell Axel that he had to leave his sister Greta alone for at least a couple of hours. It was during a rest time. So he literally put his sleeping bag on the floor outside of her room and lay there so that she could not leave without him knowing, and that he could be as close as possible to her. So there's definitely the psychological impact of what's happening. You can watch it at different ages, and the kid that you thought you were parenting in January is now a very different child and has very different reactions to things that you didn't expect. Our middle is extremely social. She misses her friends. She hates online school because she can't crack jokes and no one laughs at her. And she doesn't have the sense of connection that she needs in order to really flourish. Our oldest likes online school, but she is increasingly cut off because she's not the one to initiate social stuff, right? So, and she bears the weight of the world on her shoulders. She's an oldest, and her personality is such that she wants to know things, but then she also recognizes her limited ability to change things. So there's actually the parenting of the kids, which happens at, I'm just going to say, inconvenient times. Not that there's ever a convenient time, but it happens at moments where you really ought to be doing anything else, and yet this is the demand that's on you in this moment, and they are in the space, and this has to happen right now. So all of this is to say that we've had wonderful moments as a family during this. We have found shared hobbies that we've been able to do. We've forced to work through conflicts. The kids, I finally just said to them, you're going to have to work it out. Come back when you're done and let me know how you've decided to work it out. They've learned to navigate with each other and negotiate more effectively. We have eaten together more often as a family at the table than we have for years. And so there are wonderful things. The story time is longer than it used to be because online meetings mean I'm home earlier, and the bishop isn't traveling to yet another congregation. And so those bedtime routines have happened in ways that they haven't before too. But all of that is alongside. So it's like that photo I showed at the beginning. There are lovely moments, but they never, that's never the whole story. That oftentimes it is an absolute mess behind the scenes. There are a couple of things that I have found helpful as I've been doing this. And one of them has come from a therapist, a counselor that I've really appreciated. And she told me a few years ago, she offered up for me a different definition of success. That letting go of success as an outcome-based idea, because so often we have a difficult time controlling any outcomes, but that success doesn't have to do with outcomes, but success is living by your values. And that requires you to be able to articulate your values. And I remembered that in the middle of this experience in March. And when I first did this exercise with her, she encouraged me to sit down and actually write out sentences. I am a person who. I am a person who. And you finish that sentence with a variety of things that would describe you. I am a person who honors others' emotions. I am a person who is honest and kind. I am a person who works for justice in all the world. And I found that at the beginning of COVID, towards the end of March, I had to do this all over again because I needed to remind myself who I was, but I also needed to tailor this to our experience that we were having. And so being able to write out those sentences, finish them, and then have those be a reminder to me of what my values were means that then if I make a decision that's in line with my values, and I have experienced alignment, then I can go to bed at night. And that I don't have to think of all the things I have not yet done, or the things that I did that I probably should have done differently, but we just didn't know, right? That really made a difference for me. So success is living by one's values. The other thing that does is it takes the definition of success away from anybody else and puts it back in the hands and empowers the person who's making the decisions to decide what is success. Because right now so much is up for grabs in terms of even our knowledge base, like what is the right decision? Depends on where you live, right? Depends on your numbers, depends on your occupation, depends on all kinds of things. That empowering people to go ahead and make decisions based on their values, I think is an empowering concept in a time that feels very disempowering. So that has been very, very important to me. The second thing that's been really important and helpful is grace. I preach grace a lot to other people. I feel sometimes, true full confession, that when I apply grace to my own parenting or my own ministry, I feel as though I'm giving myself a cop-out or something that I am allowing myself to not live up to my own expectations, right? But I've had to practice grace in a way that I've never had to before. And I do think it has made me a better pastor. I think it has made me a better parent. So that experience of having to practice giving myself grace and articulating it, right now I'm giving myself grace and saying to my kids, I hope you can give me grace when I've messed up, that when I apologize to them and I say I'm sorry, that when they can give me grace, that when we can use that language, it not only teaches me, but it teaches them about that. And the third thing that I would say is just honesty. Being able to be honest about how we're experiencing things. Of course, this is age appropriate, right? I don't need to, my children are not my confidants, and there's no need for me to give them those things. That's inappropriate. But in order for them to understand that I have emotions, and I am sad, and I am frustrated, and there is nothing for them to do about it. But in order for us to have an authentic relationship, I can be honest with them about the things that I'm feeling and how I struggle, and that then we keep going. So those three things, identifying and living by values, a lot of grace, as Jason just said in the chat, and then honesty has brought us this far. And we will keep going, and there will be many things I'm sure we will learn, but that has kept us moving and kept the world spinning until this moment.
Kendra, thank you for that powerful testimony and encouragement for all of us. Much of what you have shared applies not only to how we are parenting, but just how we are simply navigating in this time. So amen, God bless. And now I invite our friend Jess into the speaking space.
Hey, thank you, Kendra. And thank you, Bill, William, for the beautiful devotion. And I'm just bringing who I am and whatever I may have that hopefully will continue our conversation today, not only for those of you who are in this space as parents who are, we entitled this the Three-Ring Circus. If your life has felt like a three-ring circus of holding all of the roles at the same time and maybe none of them well at any given time, some of the time. For those of you who are here as as parents with that experience, I hope you directly hear yourself in our stories and find grace for yourself and some maybe action steps or solutions. And for those of you who are here because you care about parents who are in this children at home space that are trying to live an impossible reality right now of working and navigating changes that are coming our way every single day with whether daycare is open or not, whether your school will be virtual or hybrid or whatever. I hope that you will hear, I'm going to share a little bit of something that I've done to help contribute to my fellow parent pastor mamas, actually is the group that I've worked with, that would be replicable in a coaching space with a group or an individual. I think had some powerful impact and fun. There's at least one person actually in here that was on my experimental group coaching experience. And I also am really glad that there's at least one child here and one parent who is doing the multiple things at once with us in this space. So welcome all of you and thank you. I'm Pastor Jess Daum. You can see over my shoulder my 3 responsibilities in life. Let me see, I might be able to share. When Kendra shared a picture, then I was like, oh, I do want to share a picture. Let's see. Here's my wild and crazy family. We are dressed colorfully for Easter because I let my daughter pick everything because we weren't going anywhere and it didn't matter what anybody looked like. And so she picked all the pink and teal and green plaid we had in the house, and we made some new traditions this Easter. Sitting on my lap is Calvin. He is 3 and he has a perpetually runny nose his entire life. So COVID check is not great for him. Like daycare is like, your child has a runny nose. I'm like, yes, he has for 3.5 years. So I think he's probably not sick with COVID, but my daughter Ruby in the middle is 5 and more than a half, she would have me tell you. And she begins kindergarten this fall. So we have just set up a small, a short plastic table from Costco in our living room last night with her school space, and she is lucky for us beside herself to be beginning kindergarten and so excited, and will literally probably with a digital clock and a list of what to do at what time probably manage her own at-home school on the days that we're at home. So thank God that's the child that has to do this year. And then on my husband Trey's lap is August. Calvin and August are twins, and they're both 3 and they're delightful and keep us very, very, very busy. And my husband Trey is an ELCA pastor serving as an interim associate pastor right now. And how do I stop sharing my screen? There it is. You'd think I'd know this by now, all the Zoom things. I serve as Director for Evangelical Mission in my Synod of Eastern North Dakota. In Fargo is where I live and where I work. And beginning, gosh, what was it? March 1st or April 1st? It was probably April 1st, right? Where everything was clearly closed. We brought our kids home starting April 1st. They both attend daycare, or sorry, the 3 of them attend daycare full-time typically, and my husband and I work full-time, even though I have people before COVID thought that I balanced work and my kids, like that they were at home with me while I worked, which I can't grasp how they think I would have been doing that. And now that for a stretch was what we were actually doing. So starting April 1st, we brought our kids home from daycare. Our governor had created a grant that allowed us to do that and keep our daycare spot without paying for it. So thank goodness that gave us the flexibility financially to bring our kids home, but financial was only one piece of the puzzle. That left me and my husband with both fairly important, fairly busy jobs and 3 kids who cannot self-entertain or need constant refereeing and engagement and activity and love and care and more attention than the 2 of us had to give if they had all of our attention. But we kind of, at first we were in crisis mode and we're like, all right, what do we do? And do we even need to do our jobs? Like, is this the end of the world? You know, the COVID roller coaster. At first it's like, what's happening here? This is ridiculous. And then it began to become a little normal, and it looked like we were going to have them home and actually work a while. And so we luckily both were able to work fully from home. So we took our days and split them in half. And one of us would be on kids for the morning and work for the afternoon. And then we switched depending on what our meetings looked like day by day. And I developed a superhuman superpower of working, like, if you ever make juice out of that frozen, like, thing, concentrate or whatever, like working in a way that like the same pitcher of juice before adding water, like in my half a day, I could get done what I used to get done in a full day. And it wasn't because I was slacking off before, it was because I turned on an intensity of focus and got the things done. My husband did about the same thing, and we did that April, May, June. And then in July, we decided here in North Dakota, our numbers were reasonable. I bet winter's gonna get bad. Let's take advantage of sending them back to our full-time daycare. And my first day back to a full day of work, still working from home, by about 1 p.m., I was about ready to keel over dead to the world because I was still working at the intensity I had developed out of necessity when I was working half days. And I thought, well, now I get so much done that I have my whole entire day. And I figured out, no, there's no sustainability to the way that I was working before. I needed to remember how to build in breaks where usually I would visit with a coworker or go on Facebook, whatever it might be, to spread that productivity back out over the day. And I just led me to some reflection over like, what do we value in our society? What is it to be a person? Who does God say that I am? And then what have I built up to understand myself as sort of this machine rather than a person, and the outcome of my work is what makes me worthwhile rather than who God has created me to be. And then it feels like this summer everyone maybe had a slight breather, or we at least got used to the pace. And now with fall starting, my favorite Facebook group in the world, Lutheran Leader Moms, where everyone on is a mother and some kind of a leader in the ELCA. I think it's mostly pastors and deacons, but it might also be other people in ministry as well. Began to light up with post after post of what on earth are we going to do with fall? We cannot do what we did with spring for fall. We were white knuckling it for the sake of survival, parenting and working, doing all of the things at once. And now if this is about to be our school year, we can't go into it with the same plans that we've had. So saw this 3, 4, 5 different times, saw a few people reply with, get a coach, it's great. And I was like, yay, I love coaching culture. I love people are saying this to one another. And then it dawned on me, I had taken a 301 course? What are the coaching teams and groups, coaching teams and groups course. And I have coached teams, congregations that are working on the same thing together, or like a group of people that are working as a team on something, but I'd never used the skills that I picked up and learned and taken notes on for coaching a group, which means an unrelated set of people who are all working on a similar goal. And I said, I really want to try that out because I'm crazy and I just like to try new things and learn new things. So just said, for free, if anybody wants to be my guinea pigs, I want to take a group of 2 groups, up to 8 people. We're going to do some coaching of setting up yourself for sanity this fall, setting up to save your soul this fall. I mean, Jesus saves our souls, but how to keep our souls refreshed in this life that we're living. And I had 7 people take me up on the offer for the first group and 6 for the second group. And I think it went really, really well. I should like toss it to the person who was actually there to give the real debrief on. But it was beautiful to take 90 minutes and as a group sharing the space together, but doing a lot of the work each individually through writing on their own, to pause for a minute and not just be running from one thing to the next, but to create the space it takes to reflect on what we've learned and what we need and how we might move forward in a different way. And the feedback was primarily like, that space was what I needed and I didn't know it. The solutions were in front of me or inside of me, but I hadn't accessed them yet because I hadn't had the time. I'll just share that what we did introductions around the space, and in coaching a group, it's really kind of important to make sure there's enough interaction, in my opinion, that people kind of create relationship with each other, but it's structured so that nobody can take and run away with the time, like hijacking it. If that began to happen, I would suggest somebody like, you need a coach all to yourself. So with a little humor, kind of redirect us back to the task at hand. So we did introductions. Who are you? if you want to write this structure down, I think it's totally doable, and I could create a document and send it to Jill to be shared too. But who are you? What's your household look like? Where and in what role do you serve? What is your school plan for fall? Because that's what we were focused on, and not like a long description of it, but like as an in-person, virtual, hybrid. And then lastly, no matter what happens over the next months, what is the most important thing to you? So each person kind of, like you said, Kendra, values or priorities, like what, no matter what the details become, what are we aiming for, or what do we want to keep our eye on? And everybody's answers to that was beautifully different. And then the next thing we did after sharing those introductions was a couple of weeks prior, I was working on a project that had me going through my photos to find photos of things I've been doing in ministry. And I was struck by, I know when Trey and I were going through this, we would say to ourselves, like, someday we're gonna look back and this will have been the time of our lives, to have had this extra time with our kids home and know them well and do things with them that were low key and really special. And as I scrolled through my photos, I realized I already had that feeling coming to me, like it was already accessible to see the joy that was available to us, even though 90% of the time we were yelling at somebody. But the rest of the 10% was beautiful. So I invited the people there, who were all women and moms in this case, to look through their photo reel, either actually, literally, or mentally, and see what came to them, noticing the joy, and to write down words as they looked. And then when we came back as a full group after a few minutes, I invited people to share up to 4 words with the rest of the group. And the kind of words people shared were deeper connections, better rest, play, understanding, renewal, dance, laugh, grow, worship, family, time, collaboration, insight, bonding, the list goes on. And then we were all kind of teary. And we moved to the next question, which was, what were the sticky parts, the stuck points, or the challenges that kept you from those moments of joy? So people made lists of that. I invited them, after some time reflecting and writing, to circle or add any that are newly anticipated challenges for the fall. Some people had moved to a new call over the summer, or they now have a child in school who wasn't before, whatever that may be. And once they had that list of challenges from spring and any new anticipated challenges for fall, zero in on which one do you fear will be the biggest problem for you this fall. Circle, mark, note. And then we went into a brainstorm. I stole this from Prepare and Rich, which I trained in seminary, the marital counseling. Brainstorm 10 ways to meet this challenge, and do not stop until you get to 10. And to get to 10, you might need some ridiculous ones, like, can you rent a SpaceX rocket for yourself to go to the moon? And bring your family, maybe not. Bring your congregation, maybe not. What you pick. And then we came back and we shared 3 that just might work. 3 of those 10 solutions that just might work. And then I gave a little instruction on how to create an action plan, but that we didn't do it in that space. I said, make 1 to 3 action plans for those solutions you found that might help you head into this fall in a better way than you experienced this spring. But then instead of making and sharing those action plans, which I believe people can do on their own or follow up with a coach, I asked this coaching question: what do you believe about the church that ought to support you moving into these plans in the fall? So to avoid stacking questions or explaining it too much, the idea is we work for an employer that is not the same as any other employer. We work for the church with a capital C. So as people in ministry, what might fuel our motivation to move toward those most important things that we identified at the beginning? And what might the world gain from leaders in their church who are living in a different way? Not just trying to spread yourself out over all of the demands, but actually shifting and paring down and focusing in on what really matters. And my kids, somebody put something about liminal time. It's like kids are in liminal time, and they're also like completely in the moment at every single moment. And that has taught me something over the last months too, that sometimes I have grand plans and great strategies and a to-do list that's 3 pages long. My kids have this moment and they want me in that moment. And sometimes the patience and the presence it takes to be ministering to them is actually my pathway to becoming more of who Christ is calling me to be as I follow him. the last thing that we did was we created a flurry of scripture as we look back at the challenges, the joys, the most important thing, what scripture comes to people's minds. And so we shared those as they came to us. I think it was time really well spent, and a part of what comes out of it is the question of, you know, maybe that's a model for something that could be done in your context. It didn't take much arm twisting to get people to show up for it. I think about 50 people indicated interest, and then in that first batch of groups, that was 6 + 7, somebody do the math, 13 people who said yes, like just right away, and the times that I even offered just worked for them. We didn't do doodle poll or anything. So I think the need is really there, and I think it goes beyond parents. If anybody saw the CDC mental health findings that came out regarding the month of June, for young adults, up to 25% of young adults have contemplated suicide or had suicidal ideation during the time of the pandemic. 50 to 60% of young adults either are experiencing notable anxiety or depression. I think being invited into coaching groups around making mental health plans and being reminded of your worth is another thing that, you know, wouldn't have to be the population of parents in ministry. It could be any population. I think everyone is yearning for this space, and the world isn't just going to give it to us. There's not going to be like a COVID break where you can spend some time figuring out how to do this better. We are doing life on the fly, and I think God calls us to take the time we need in order to do that well. That's what I brought today. I'm sorry that's a little long-winded.
Jess, it was great. And it was exactly what we needed. The brilliant testimony, the sharing of your hearts, Kendra and Jess. We need to hear your stories. Your stories reflect our stories. And there is, I can see from the chat area, Jess, a hope that you will put all of that in a document and share it with us so Jason can put it on our website. With this, Jason, I want you to be ready to send us to breakout rooms in like 2s or 3s. We're going to go there for like 4 minutes. And in this time, I would like you to, part of the power of coaching is naming things out loud. I invite you in your pairs of 2 or 3 to name out loud one thing that's really shining from what our speakers shared today. And then I also want you to name in 3 or 4 words. I love, Jess, how you help limit that. What's an action step that you're going to take, either for yourself, you as a parent that has a young family still in the home, or you as a concerned adult, how you are going to support parents in this time. So you should be sent there automatically depending on your device. You may have to click join to go there. And we're going to bring you back like 2 minutes till the hour, and William's going to do a very short final blessing for us. And another quick word while I'm giving Jason some space to create this big breakout rooms. We will stay on the line extra. I will leave the room open for further casual conversation, and we will end in prayer. So for those of you that desire a little bit more conversation to unpack this great stuff, thank you so much. And it looks like our colleague Bill had to step away, and Jason and I were saying how ironic is it that he probably needed to step away to take care of his daughter in this time. Very, very appropriate. With that, I invite you to join. I thank you again for being with us today. I invite you to join us next week as we talk about how we journey in this time of COVID alongside people that are struggling with addiction. This is an area that church doesn't often speak about out loud. And we have confirmed one guest speaker, Vicar Michelle Knight, who is currently a student entering her last year at Wartburg Seminary. And I saw smiles of people that are connected to Wartburg and that know Michelle. She will be a powerful speaker for us. This is an important topic, so please come back while we wrestle with that and talk about how are we church in that particular space. So friends, I invite you, those of you that have the capacity to stay on for a more informal conversation, The room will be open. We will end our time in prayer led by Deacon Tammy Devine. And God bless you. God bless the good work that you are doing in the kingdom of God. And this day, this time was better because you were here. Thank you. Thank you again to our speakers, Kendra and Jess, for showing us your hearts, sharing your world with us, helping us be brave as we step into this space this fall. God bless you, everyone. Thank you for your time.